Victoria Sterling slammed her palm on the mahogany desk, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're fired, Mr. Morrison. Effective immediately." David stood frozen, the leave request form trembling in his hand. 9 years. 9 years of perfect attendance, and she was firing him for asking for one single day off to watch his daughter's school play. "Please, Miss Sterling, I've never asked for anything. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk." But what Victoria didn't know was that her billionaire father had been watching David for months. And in 2 weeks, she'd walk into the most important gala of her career, only to find her father dining with a man she'd just destroyed. Drop a comment below with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. And if you want to hear what happens next, hit that subscribe button, because this gets wild. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, and David Morrison stepped out, adjusting the worn strap of his laptop bag. His reflection in the polished glass walls showed a man in his late 30s, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a suit that was clean but not expensive. He'd bought it 6 years ago, and it still fit fine. Good enough. "Morning, David," called out Janet from reception, barely looking up from her computer. "Morning," he replied, his voice quiet, practiced at not drawing attention. He moved through the maze of cubicles like a ghost, nodding to colleagues who didn't really see him. That was fine. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to do his job, collect his paycheck, and get home to Emma. David settled into his cubicle, the same one he'd occupied for 9 years. The same motivational poster on the wall, some mountain peak with the word excellence underneath it. He'd stopped reading it 7 years ago. What caught his eye every morning was the photo taped to his monitor. Emma, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a crayon drawing of the two of them. "Me and Daddy," she'd written in wobbly letters. He powered on his computer and pulled up the quarterly reports. Numbers flooded the screen, and David felt himself slip into the rhythm of work. This was his safe place. Numbers didn't judge. Numbers didn't ask questions. Numbers just needed to balance, and he was good at making them balance. "Morrison!" David's fingers froze on the keyboard. He turned to see Gerald Watts, the department supervisor, standing at the entrance to his cubicle. "Yes, sir?" "Sterling wants the Q3 projections on her desk by noon. Sharp." "They're already done, sir. I can send them now." "She wants them printed. Full breakdown. Color charts." Gerald's face was already red, the way it always was when Victoria Sterling made demands. "And she wants the South American market analysis separately." David nodded. "I'll have it ready in 20 minutes. Gerald walked away without a thank you, but David was already pulling up the files. This was the dance. Victoria Sterling demanded, everyone scrambled, and David delivered. Always had, always would. An hour later, David stood outside Victoria Sterling's executive suite, holding a leather portfolio containing 60 pages of meticulously organized financial data. The assistant, a young woman named Claire who changed every 6 months because nobody lasted long with Victoria, barely acknowledged him. "Leave it on the desk," she said, typing furiously. "Miss Sterling is in a meeting." David set the portfolio down gently and turned to leave. "Wait." Claire looked up, her eyes showing something like sympathy. "You're Morrison, right? Accounting?" "Yes." 9 years here?" "Yes." She shook her head slightly. "Good luck," she said, and David wasn't sure what she meant by that. He returned to his desk and dove back into the numbers. The morning evaporated. Lunch came and went. He ate the same sandwich he'd packed that morning, turkey and cheese, sitting at his desk because the break room felt too loud, too social, too much. At 2:15 his phone rang, Internal extension. His stomach tightened the way it always did when the phone rang. Phone calls meant problems. Morrison speaking. David, it's Karen from HR. Her voice was professional, flat. Can you come down to my office, please? His heart rate picked up. Is everything okay? Just need to go over some paperwork. Won't take long. David saved his work and headed to the elevator. HR was on the 20th floor, and the ride down felt longer than it should have. Karen Hendricks had been with the company for 15 years, and she'd seen hundreds of employees come and go. She had the face of someone who'd stopped being surprised by anything. Have a seat, David, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat, his hands folded in his lap. Karen pulled out a file folder. I'm going through personnel reviews, and I noticed you've been with us 9 years next month. Yes, ma'am. Never missed a day of work, never been late, never had a single complaint filed against you. She looked up from the file. That's remarkable, David. Really. I just do my job. You do it well. She closed the file. Have you ever thought about advancement? Moving into management? David felt his throat tighten. This was dangerous territory. Visibility meant scrutiny. I'm happy where I am. You could be making 30% more, maybe more. You have the skills. I'm happy where I am, he repeated, softer this time. Karen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, just wanted to check in. You're one of the good ones, David. Don't forget that. He thanked her and left, feeling the weight of the conversation settle on his shoulders. Advancement meant longer hours, meant more responsibility, meant less time with Emma. And Emma was all that mattered. The afternoon bled into evening. The office emptied around him, cubicles going dark one by one. David finished the preliminary work for next week's budget meeting, triple-checked his calculations, and finally shut down his computer at 6:30. The apartment was in Queens, a 40-minute subway ride from Midtown Manhattan. David stood in the crowded car, holding the overhead rail, watching the darkness of the tunnels flash by. A woman with a crying baby stood next to him. A teenager with headphones bobbed his head to music David couldn't hear. An old man slept, his head bobbing with each jolt of the train. This was his life. Work. Train. Emma. Repeat. But when he opened the door to their apartment, and Emma came running, her blonde hair flying behind her like a banner, all the exhaustion melted away. Daddy! Daddy, guess what? She crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around his waist. David dropped his bag and scooped her up, even though she was getting too big for it. What's up, Jelly Bean? I got picked. I got picked for the lead in the school musical. David's heart swelled. You did? Emma, that's incredible. Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched Emma after school, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She's been bouncing off the walls since she got home. I couldn't get her to eat dinner. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. David set Emma down and pulled out his wallet, handing the elderly woman 2 20s. David, that's too much. Please, you're a lifesaver. Mrs. Chen patted his hand and left, and David turned his full attention to Emma, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Tell me everything, he said, leading her to the small kitchen table. Emma climbed into her chair, her words tumbling over each other. It's called The Enchanted Garden, and I'm going to be Lily, the main flower who saves all the other flowers from the mean weeds. And I have 3 songs, Daddy, 3. And Miss Robertson said I have the best voice in the whole 4th grade. And we're doing it on the 23rd, and you have to come. You have to. Everyone's parents are coming. And I told Miss Robertson my daddy would be in the front row and... Whoa, slow down, David laughed. But his mind had already caught on one detail. The 23rd. He pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. The 23rd was a Tuesday. Budget review meeting. The most important meeting of the quarter. Victoria Sterling would be presenting to the board, and she'd need all department heads and senior analysts present. He wasn't a department head, but he was the one who prepared the numbers. He was the one who made sure everything balanced. They'd need him there. Emma grabbed his hand.
"Daddy, you'll come, right?"
David looked into her eyes, so full of hope and trust, and felt something crack in his chest. "Of course I'll come."
"Promise?"
"I promise." She squealed and threw her arms around his neck, and David held her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. Later that night, after Emma had rehearsed her songs 4 times, after dinner, spaghetti from a box because he couldn't cook to save his life, after bath time and story time, and the ritual of tucking her in with her stuffed rabbit, David sat at the kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee and stared at his laptop. The 23rd, 3 weeks away. He'd never asked for a day off in 9 years, not one. When Emma had the flu 2 years ago, he'd worked from home. When his father died, he'd taken 3 days bereavement and come back early. He'd earned this. Surely he'd earned this. David opened his email and found the leave request form. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. This shouldn't be hard. It was just a form. Just 1 day. But something in his gut told him this was dangerous. He started typing anyway. Employee name, David Morrison. Department, accounting. Date requested, September 23rd. Reason? To attend daughter's school musical performance. Lead role, first major performance. Work coverage plan. All Q3 reports completed in advance. Budget projections submitted by September 20th. Colleague James Carter briefed on any urgent matters. He attached Emma's rehearsal schedule, a note from her teacher about the significance of the performance, and a detailed timeline of how he'd ensure zero disruption to his responsibilities. David read it 3 times. Then he hit send before he could change his mind. The email whooshed away, and he sat back, his coffee going cold in his hands. He'd done it. For the first time in 9 years, he'd asked for something for himself. Well, for Emma. Always for Emma. He didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, David arrived at the office at 7:30, same as always. He settled into his routine, losing himself in spreadsheets and forecasts. At 10:15, his computer chimed with an email notification. From v.sterling@sterlingenterprises.com. Subject: Leave request. Denied. His stomach dropped. He opened the email. Mr. Morrison, your request for leave on September 23rd has been reviewed and denied. The budget review meeting requires all essential personnel to be present. Your attendance is mandatory. Company policy clearly states that personal events do not constitute approved reasons for absence during critical business periods. You may resubmit a request for an alternate date. Victoria Sterling, CEO, Sterling Enterprises. David read it twice, then a third time. The words blurred together. Denied. Mandatory. Personal events. He thought about Emma's face, the way she'd grabbed his hand. Promise? I promise. His hands were shaking. He closed the email and tried to focus on his work, but the numbers wouldn't stay still on the screen. He kept seeing Emma on stage, searching the audience for him, her face falling when she realized he wasn't there. No, he couldn't do that to her. He wouldn't. At lunch, David walked 6 blocks to a small park and sat on a bench, eating his sandwich without tasting it. He pulled out his phone and opened the photo of Emma. She was smiling that gap-toothed smile, her eyes bright with joy and trust. Trust that her daddy would keep his promises. Trust that she mattered more than anything else. He made his decision right there, on that park bench, with pigeons pecking at crumbs near his feet. He was going to Emma's play, whatever it cost him. David walked back to the office, with his shoulders a little straighter, his jaw set. He'd never defied authority in his life. He'd never broken a rule, never challenged a policy, never made waves. But this was different. This was Emma. He typed up another email, this one shorter. Miss Sterling, thank you for reviewing my request. I understand the timing is difficult. However, I will not be able to attend the September 23rd meeting as I have a prior commitment I cannot reschedule. I will ensure all my work is completed in advance and will be available by phone for any urgent matters. Respectfully, David Morrison. He sent it before he could think too hard about what he was doing. The response came 40 minutes later, not from Victoria Sterling directly, but from her assistant, Claire. Mr. Morrison, Miss Sterling has instructed me to inform you that failure to attend the September 23rd meeting will be considered insubordination and will result in immediate termination. Please confirm your attendance by end of business today. Claire Westbrook, Executive Assistant to Victoria Sterling. David stared at the screen. Termination. 9 years, and they'd fire him over one day. One single day to watch his daughter shine. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen with a photo. Emma practicing her song in front of the mirror, using a wooden spoon as a microphone. Her face scrunched up in concentration. David smiled, despite the fear crawling up his spine. He typed back his confirmation. Confirmed. I will not be in attendance on September 23rd. He hit send and closed his laptop, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to prepare Emma for the possibility that everything might change. 2 weeks to figure out how he'd pay rent if he lost this job. 2 weeks to either find his courage or lose his nerve. But when he got home that night and Emma showed him the program for the play with her name in bold letters under lead role, he knew he'd made the only choice he could live with. I'm so proud of you, Jellybean, he said, pulling her close. You're still coming, right, Daddy? I'm still coming. Nothing could keep me away. And he meant it, even if it cost him everything. The days crawled by like a death sentence countdown. David went through the motions at work, his body present but his mind somewhere else, calculating rent payments, food budgets, how long his savings would last. He had maybe 3 months if he was careful, 4 if he cut everything to the bone. You okay, man? James Carter, the only colleague who ever bothered to talk to him, stopped by his cubicle on Wednesday morning. You look like you haven't slept in a week. David rubbed his eyes behind his glasses. Just tired. It's the Sterling crunch, right? She's been riding everyone hard about this budget meeting. James leaned against the cubicle wall, lowering his voice. Between you and me, I heard she fired 3 people last month for missing the quarterly targets by 2%. 2%, David. The woman's a machine. She's just doing her job. Her job is making everyone miserable. James shook his head. Anyway, I'm grabbing coffee. You want anything? I'm good, thanks. James left, and David turned back to his spreadsheets. The numbers blurred. He kept seeing Emma's face instead, the way she'd hugged him so tight when he promised he'd be there. A promise he was going to keep, no matter what Victoria Sterling said. That afternoon, Claire from Victoria's office appeared at his cubicle. She looked uncomfortable, holding a folder against her chest like a shield. Mr. Morrison, Miss Sterling wanted me to give you this personally. David took the folder. Inside was a printed memo, official Sterling Enterprises letterhead, his name at the top. He scanned the contents, his throat tightening with each line. Final warning. Mandatory attendance required, September 23rd. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination and forfeiture of all benefits, including accrued vacation pay and severance consideration. This is your final notice.
She wanted me to make sure you understood, Claire said quietly. She's serious, Mr. Morrison. I've seen her do this before. She doesn't bluff.
David looked up at her. Claire couldn't have been more than 25, fresh out of college, probably drowning in student loans and desperately clinging to her job. How long have you worked for her?
4 months.
How many assistants has she had in the past 2 years? Claire's face flushed.
I'm the 7th.
What happened to the others?
They quit, or she fired them, same difference.
She glanced over her shoulder, then back at him.
Look, I don't know what's going on with you, but whatever it is, it's not worth your career. Just show up on the 23rd. That's all you have to do.
I can't.
Why not? What's so important that you'd throw away 9 years?
David pulled the photo of Emma from his desk and showed it to her. She's performing in her school musical. Lead role. She's 9 years old, and she's worked harder for this than I've ever seen her work for anything. And I promised I'd be there. Claire stared at the photo, something shifting in her expression.
You're going to lose your job over a school play?
I'm going to keep my promise to my daughter. She handed the folder back to him slowly.
Then I hope it's worth it, Mr. Morrison. I really do.
After she left, David sat very still, holding the memo in his hands. The words swam before his eyes. Immediate termination. Forfeiture of all benefits. He thought about Emma's medical insurance, her dental work next month, the new winter coat she needed because she'd outgrown last year's. He thought about the rent, due on the 1st, the electricity bill, the groceries. Everything built on the foundation of this job he was about to lose. Then he thought about Emma's voice, small and hopeful.
Promise?
He crumpled the memo and threw it in the trash. The weekend came, and David took Emma to the park. They fed the ducks, got ice cream from the vendor on the corner, played on the swings until the sun started to set. Normal things. Dad and daughter things. The kind of moments that made everything else worthwhile.
Daddy?
Emma licked her chocolate ice cream, her feet swinging from the bench.
Are you sad about something?
David's chest tightened.
No, Jellybean. Why would you think that? You keep looking at me funny, like you're trying to remember what I look like.
Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. David pulled her close, getting chocolate on his shirt and not caring. I'm just really proud of you, that's all.
Because of the play?
Because of everything. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You know that? Emma giggled.
You're silly, Daddy.
I'm serious. Best thing ever. She nestled against his side, and they watched the ducks until the street lights flickered on. Monday morning, David arrived at work to find Gerald Watts waiting by his cubicle, red-faced and agitated. Morrison, my office. Now! David followed him to the small glass-walled office at the end of the floor. Gerald shut the door and turned on him. What the hell are you doing? I'm sorry? Sterling is on my ass about you. Me, David. She called me into her office Friday and chewed me out for 15 minutes because you're refusing to attend the budget meeting. Do you know how that makes me look? I apologize, but I don't want your apologies. I want you at that meeting. Whatever personal thing you have going on, reschedule it. David kept his voice level. I can't. Can't or won't? Both. Gerald's face went from red to purple. I've protected you for years, Morrison.
kept you under the radar, kept Sterling from noticing how quiet you are, how you never volunteer for anything, never put yourself forward.
And this is how you repay me? By making me look like an idiot? That's not my intention. I don't care about your intentions. Gerald slammed his hand on the desk. You're going to march up to the 42nd floor right now and apologize to Miss Sterling. You're going to tell her you'll be at that meeting. Or I swear to God, I'll personally hand you your termination papers myself. David stood there, feeling something cold and calm settle over him. 9 years of being invisible. 9 years of keeping his head down. 9 years of letting people like Gerald take credit for his work, while he stayed in the shadows. No, he said quietly. Gerald blinked. What did you just say to me? I said no. I'm not apologizing, and I'm not going to be at the meeting. Then you're fired. That's Miss Sterling's decision, not yours. Oh, it'll be my pleasure to recommend it. Gerald opened his office door. Get out, and start clearing your desk. You've got until the 23rd, and then you're done. David walked back to his cubicle, his heart hammering, but his head clear. He'd crossed a line he could never uncross. But Emma's face floated in his mind, and he knew he'd do it again. The next few days were surreal. People avoided him in the hallways. Conversations stopped when he approached the break room. Word had spread that he was defying Victoria Sterling. And in the culture of Sterling Enterprises, that was like signing your own death warrant. Only James still talked to him. Man, you've got guts, James said, perching on the edge of David's desk Wednesday afternoon. Stupid, suicidal guts, but guts. I'm just doing what I have to do. For your kid, right? The play? Yeah. James was quiet for a moment. I've got 2 kids myself, 6 and 8. I missed my son's first soccer game last month because Sterling scheduled an emergency meeting. He cried for an hour. My wife's still not speaking to me. He looked at David with something like envy. Maybe you've got the right idea after all. I might be unemployed in a week. Yeah, but at least you'll be able to look your daughter in the eye. Thursday evening, David's phone rang while he was helping Emma with her homework. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Mr. Morrison? A man's voice, smooth and cultured. My name is William Sterling. I believe you work for my daughter's company. David's blood went cold. Victoria Sterling's father, the billionaire founder of Sterling Enterprises, now semi-retired, but still the largest shareholder. Yes, sir. I understand there's been some difficulty regarding a scheduling matter. Sir, I don't want to cause any problems. I'm not calling to reprimand you, Mr. Morrison. I'm calling because my daughter mentioned your situation at dinner last night, and it intrigued me. She said you're refusing to attend an important meeting to watch your daughter perform in a school play. Is that accurate? David swallowed hard. Yes, sir. How old is your daughter? 9. And what's the play? It's called The Enchanted Garden. She's the lead. William Sterling chuckled, a warm sound. The lead. That's wonderful. My daughter used to perform in school plays when she was young. I made it to maybe 1 in 3. Always had something more important. Business deals, board meetings, you know how it is. Yes, sir. She stopped inviting me after a while. Can't say I blame her. There was a pause. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, why is this so important to you? David glanced at Emma, hunched over her math worksheet, tongue poking out in concentration. Because I only get one chance at this, sir. She's only 9 once. This play only happens once. The meetings, the reports, they'll always be there. But this moment? It's gone if I miss it. And your job? That doesn't concern you? It terrifies me, sir. I'm a single father. I've got rent, bills, insurance. Losing this job could ruin us. David's voice cracked.
But missing her play would ruin something else. Something I can't fix with another paycheck. The line was silent for so long, David thought the call had dropped. "Mr. Morrison," William Sterling finally said, "I'm going to give you my personal number. I'd like you to call me after your daughter's performance. Can you do that?" Yes, sir. But why?" "Because I think we might have something to discuss." "Enjoy the play, Mr. Morrison." The line went dead. David stared at his phone, confused and unnerved. William Sterling's personal number appeared in his recent calls. He saved it, his hands shaking. "Daddy?" Emma looked up from her homework. "Who is that?" "Just work, Jellybean. Nothing to worry about." Friday afternoon, David finished the last of his reports. Every spreadsheet balanced. Every projection triple-checked. Every piece of work he was responsible for, completed to perfection. If they were going to fire him, they couldn't say he left anything undone. He printed everything out, organized it in neat folders, and left them on Gerald's desk with a note. "All Q3 materials complete. Budget projections for Q4 attached. South American market analysis included. Contact information below if questions arise." Then he went home and helped Emma practice her songs one last time. The morning of September 23rd dawned gray and drizzly. David woke up at 5 a.m., his stomach in knots. He checked his email. Nothing from Sterling Enterprises. He checked his phone. No calls. He made Emma her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, and watched her eat, her chatter filling their small kitchen with light and life. "Are you nervous, Jellybean?" "A little bit. What if I forget the words?" "You won't. You've practiced 100 times. What if I trip?" "Then you'll get up and keep going. That's what brave people do." Emma nodded, solemn. "Are you nervous, Daddy?" More than you could possibly know, he thought. "Nope. I'm just excited to see you shine." The play was at 2 p.m. David dropped Emma at school at 8, watching her run into the building with her costume in a garment bag, her nerves and excitement radiating off her in waves. Then he went home and sat in his apartment, watching the clock tick toward his professional execution. At 9:30, his phone rang. Sterling Enterprises' main line. "David Morrison?" "Mr. Morrison, this is Claire Westbrook. Miss Sterling has asked me to inform you that your absence today has been noted. Your termination papers are being processed. Security has been notified to collect your company property. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your address on file." David closed his eyes. There it was. 9 years, ended with a phone call from an assistant. "I understand. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "Thank you, Claire." He hung up and sat very still, feeling the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Unemployed, single father, no prospects, no safety net. But at 1:30, he put on his best suit, grabbed the bouquet of flowers he'd bought for Emma, and headed to PS 142. The school auditorium was packed with parents, grandparents, siblings. David found a seat in the 3rd row, right in the center where Emma could see him. Around him, fathers in expensive suits checked their phones. Mothers in designer clothes chatted about weekend plans. He was wearing a 6-year-old suit and had just lost his job, but none of that mattered. The lights dimmed, the curtain rose, and there was Emma, standing center stage in her flower costume, her face painted with glitter, her voice clear and strong as she began to sing. David felt tears prick his eyes. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. Every note, every line, every gesture, she owned that stage. When she spotted him in the audience, her face lit up with a smile so bright it could have powered the whole city. For 2 hours, David forgot about Victoria Sterling. He forgot about his termination. He forgot about rent and bills and the uncertain future stretching ahead of him. He just watched his daughter shine. When the final curtain fell and Emma took her bows, the audience erupted in applause. David stood, clapping until his hands hurt, his face wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. Emma ran to him after, still in her costume, and he swept her up in his arms. "You were incredible, Jellybean. I'm so proud of you." "Did you see me, Daddy? Did you see my solo?" "I saw everything. You were the best one up there." She hugged him tight, and David knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, he'd made the right choice. That evening, after ice cream and celebration, after Emma had finally fallen asleep clutching her program, David sat at his kitchen table and pulled out his phone. William Sterling's number glowed on the screen. He took a breath and dialed. "Morrison," the cultured voice answered on the second ring. "How was the play?" "She was perfect, sir. Worth everything." "I'm glad to hear it. Now, let's talk about your future." David's hand tightened around the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the thin wall, he could hear Emma's soft breathing from her bedroom, the rhythmic sound that always anchored him when the world felt too big, too uncertain. "My future, sir?" David kept his voice low. "With all due respect, I just got fired. I don't think I have much of a future to discuss." William Sterling's laugh was warm, almost grandfatherly. "That's where you're wrong, Mr. Morrison. Tell me something. When was the last time you thought about what you actually want to do with your career?" David blinked at the question. "I'm sorry?" "Humor me. When did you last consider what work might fulfill you? Not just pay the bills, but actually matter to you." "Sir, I'm a single father. I don't have the luxury of thinking about fulfillment. I think about rent. I think about Emma's school supplies. I think about keeping the lights on." "I understand that. Believe me, I started with nothing. I know what it's like to count every dollar." William's voice softened. "But you just sacrificed your entire income to watch your daughter perform in a school play. That tells me you understand something most people in business never learn. You understand what actually matters." David rubbed his eyes, exhaustion and stress making his head pound. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the call, but I don't understand what you want from me." "I want to offer you a job." The words hung in the air. David thought he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "A position, working directly with me. I'm restructuring my charitable foundation, the Sterling Legacy Fund. I need someone who understands numbers, yes, but more importantly, someone who understands values. Someone who knows the difference between price and worth." "Sir, I just balance spreadsheets. I'm not—" "You're exactly what I need. I've been watching you, David, for 3 months now." David's blood ran cold. "Watching me?" "Not in a creepy way, I assure you," William chuckled. "I make it a point to know what's happening in my daughter's company. I review personnel files occasionally, talk to people, get a sense of the culture. Your name kept coming up. 9 years, perfect record, never a complaint, never a raise, never a promotion. I was curious about the man who could be that invisible for that long." "I'm not trying to be invisible, I'm just trying to survive." "I know. That's what made me reach out to Gerald Watts a few weeks ago. I asked him about you. He said you were the best analyst he'd ever worked with, but you had no ambition, no drive, content to stay in your little corner forever." David felt his jaw clench. "Gerald said that?" "He did. So I dug a little deeper. I found out about Emma, about your wife passing away 7 years ago. about you raising your daughter alone while working 60-hour weeks. And then I heard about your leave request and my daughter's response. And I knew I had to meet you. Why? Because anyone can make money, David. Hell, I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I've lost things along the way. Important things. My daughter barely speaks to me outside of board meetings. My grandchildren don't know me. I sacrificed family for fortune. And now I'm trying to figure out how to make that fortune mean something. William paused. You didn't make that mistake. You chose your daughter over your job without hesitation. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. David's throat felt tight. Mr. Sterling, I'm unemployed. I have maybe 3 months of savings. I can't afford to make wise choices right now. Which is why I'm offering you a position. $60,000 a year to start. Full benefits. Flexible hours. You work from home mostly. Come to my office in Westchester twice a week for meetings. The job is real, David. The work is real. I need someone to help me direct $80 million toward causes that actually matter. And I need someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear. 60,000. That was 20,000 more than he'd been making at Sterling Enterprises. David felt dizzy. Why would you do this for me? I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I need people around me who remember what matters. And frankly, I'm tired of watching my daughter destroy good people in the name of efficiency. William's voice hardened. She learned that from me, and I take responsibility for it. But I'm trying to do better. Help me do better, David. David thought about Emma sleeping in the next room. Thought about the rent due in a week. Thought about the termination papers probably sitting on his doorstep right now. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you're available. I'll have a contract drawn up tonight. You'll sign it at my office, and we'll get to work immediately. Just like that? Just like that. I trust my instincts about people, and my instincts say you're someone I can count on. Am I wrong? David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 9 years of invisibility. 9 years of keeping his head down and playing it safe, finally lifting off his shoulders. No, sir, you're not wrong. Good. I'll text you the address. Come at 10 a.m. And David, bring Emma if you need to. I have a granddaughter about her age. They might enjoy meeting each other. The call ended, and David sat in the darkness of his kitchen, staring at his phone like it might disappear if he looked away. This didn't happen. People didn't get fired and land better jobs 12 hours later. People like him didn't get rescued by billionaires. But his phone buzzed with a text. An address in Westchester County. See you tomorrow. W.S. David didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was real, or if he'd wake up and find himself still unemployed, still terrified, still drowning. But morning came, and the text was still there. He dropped Emma at school, watching her skip through the doors still buzzing from yesterday's triumph, and then he took the Metro North to Westchester. The house, mansion really, sat behind iron gates, all old money and quiet elegance. Nothing like the cold glass tower of Sterling Enterprises. A housekeeper answered the door and led him through hallways lined with art that probably cost more than David would make in a lifetime. William Sterling was in a wood-paneled study, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking more like someone's grandfather than a billionaire. "David," he stood, extending his hand. "Right on time. I like that." They shook, and William gestured to a leather chair. A contract sat on the desk, already prepared, already signed by William. David read through it carefully. Everything William had promised was there. Salary, benefits, flexible hours, even a clause about family emergencies taking precedence over work obligations. You really mean this, David said softly. The part about family first. I learned that lesson too late for my own children. I won't make that mistake with my employees. William handed him a pen. If the terms are acceptable, sign. If not, tell me what needs to change. David signed. His hand only shook a little. The work was different from anything he'd done before. William wasn't interested in quarterly profits or market share. He wanted to know which charities actually helped people, which organizations wasted money on overhead, where $80 million could do the most good. David dove into financial records, interviewed nonprofit directors, built models that tracked outcomes instead of just expenses. You're good at this, William said during their second meeting, reviewing David's analysis of 3 education charities. You see patterns other people miss. It's just numbers. It's never just numbers. Numbers tell stories. You're reading the stories right. William leaned back in his chair. My daughter would have you buried in spreadsheets, optimizing profit margins. She never learned to ask what the profits are for. David hesitated. He'd been avoiding mentioning Victoria, but William brought her up constantly, always with a mix of pride and regret. She's very successful, sir. She's very rich. Not the same thing. William sighed. I made her in my image, David. Taught her that business was war, that employees were soldiers, that the only thing that mattered was winning. And she learned those lessons perfectly. Too perfectly. You sound like you regret it. I do. Every day. William looked out the window at his manicured lawn. Her mother left when Victoria was 12. Said I cared more about building an empire than building a family. She was right. I threw myself into work, and I raised Victoria to do the same. Now I'm 73 years old, sitting in a house too big for one person, trying to figure out how to spend my money in ways that might balance out all the damage I've done. David didn't know what to say to that. He thought about Emma, about the promises he'd made to never let work consume him the way it had consumed his own father. It's not too late to change, sir. For me, maybe. For Victoria? William shook his head. She's 42 years old and married to that company. No husband, no children, no life outside those glass walls. She won't even return my calls half the time. Too busy optimizing something. Over the next 2 weeks, David settled into a rhythm. He worked from home 3 days a week, analyzing grant proposals and building financial models. Twice a week, he took the train to Westchester, meeting with William to discuss strategy and direction. The money hit his bank account on the 1st of October, and for the first time in 9 years, David paid his rent without the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Emma noticed the change immediately. Daddy, you're smiling more. Am I? Yeah. Men like him didn't get second chances like this. The second week of October, William called him on a Wednesday evening. David, I need a favor. Of course, sir. What do you need? There's a charity gala this Saturday, the Manhattan Foundation benefit. Very formal, very boring, but I promised I'd attend. I'd like you to come with me. Consider it research. Half the nonprofits we're evaluating will be there, and you can meet their directors, get a sense of who's legitimate and who's just good at fundraising. David's stomach sank. Sir, I don't have a tuxedo. I'll send you to my tailor tomorrow. My treat. This is work, David. You'll be representing the Sterling Legacy Fund. What about Emma? Bring her. My housekeeper's daughter is studying early childhood education. She'd love to watch Emma for the evening. They can watch movies, eat popcorn, the works. David couldn't think of a good reason to refuse. All right. Thank you, sir. The tailor on Fifth Avenue measured him with the same care someone might use handling a priceless artifact. The tuxedo that arrived at his apartment Friday afternoon fit perfectly, made him look like someone who belonged at galas, someone who had his life together. Emma's eyes went wide when she saw him. "Daddy, you look like a prince." "I feel ridiculous." "You look amazing." She circled him, grimming. "Are you going to meet Cinderella?" "Just some work people, Jellybean. Nothing exciting." Saturday evening, the car William sent picked them up at 6. Emma chattered the whole drive to Westchester, pressing her face against the window, awed by the size of the houses they passed. The babysitter turned out to be a sweet college student who immediately connected with Emma over a shared love of animated movies. "She'll be fine," William assured David as they climbed into his car, an understated Mercedes that probably cost more than David's yearly salary.
Sarah's wonderful with children. The gala was at the Grand Hyatt, the ballroom transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, servers gliding through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. David felt like an imposter in his borrowed tuxedo, surrounded by people who spent more on their watches than he spent on rent. But William moved through the crowd with easy confidence, introducing David to foundation directors, philanthropists, city officials. "This is David Morrison, my senior advisor. Brilliant mind, impeccable integrity. If you want funding from Sterling Legacy, you'll need to impress him first." David shook hands, made small talk, tried not to feel overwhelmed. The people were friendly enough, curious about this newcomer in William Sterling's inner circle. Several nonprofit directors gave him their cards, suggested lunch meetings, promised detailed proposals. "You're doing great," William murmured as they moved toward the bar.
"Just be yourself. These people can smell fake from a mile away." They found a quiet table in an alcove, away from the main crowd. William ordered scotch for both of them, though David barely drank. For a while, they just sat, watching the glittering crowd, discussing which organizations seemed genuine and which ones were all polish and no substance. "That's Margaret Chen from the Youth Education Alliance," William said, nodding toward a woman in a red dress. "She's been running that organization for 20 years on a shoestring budget. Does incredible work, never asks for recognition. That's who we should be funding." David made a note on his phone. "I'll request their financial records Monday." "Good man," William smiled. "You know, I'm glad this worked out. You've been more valuable in 2 weeks than most of my advisors have been in years." "I just look at the numbers, sir." "You look past them. Big difference." William raised his glass. "To making money matter." They clinked glasses, and David felt something warm settle in his chest. Gratitude, maybe. Or belonging. The feeling of being valued for who he was, instead of how invisible he could make himself. "You know what the irony is?" William said, his eyes scanning the ballroom. "Victoria's probably here somewhere. She never misses these events. Too good for networking." David's blood went cold. "Miss Sterling is here?" "Probably. She's on the Manhattan Foundation board." "Why? Does that bother you?" "I just don't want to cause any awkwardness." "David, she fired you. You don't owe her anything. Not courtesy, not deference, nothing." William's voice hardened. "And frankly, I hope she does see you. Might teach her something about consequences." Before David could respond, William's attention shifted. A couple approached their table, dressed in designer clothes that screamed wealth. William stood, greeting them warmly, introducing David as his advisor. The conversation turned to a medical research fund they were all supporting, and David tried to pay attention, but his eyes kept scanning the crowd. Victoria Sterling could be anywhere in this room, could walk past any second, could see him here, in a tuxedo, sitting with her father like they were old friends. The thought made his palms sweat. An hour passed. David started to relax. Maybe Victoria hadn't come. Maybe she was too busy optimizing something to attend a simple gala. Then William laughed at something David said, a genuine, warm sound, and his hand came to rest on David's arm in a gesture of easy affection. "You remind me of myself 40 years ago," William said, before I forgot what mattered. And that's when David saw her. Across the ballroom, frozen mid-step, champagne glass trembling in her hand. Victoria Sterling, in an emerald dress that probably cost more than his car, staring at them with an expression David couldn't quite read. Shock, confusion, and underneath it all, something that looked like betrayal. Their eyes met across the crowded room. David felt his stomach drop. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. Victoria started walking toward them, her face a mask of controlled fury, and David realized that the other shoe wasn't dropping. It was being thrown directly at his head. William saw her first. His expression shifted from relaxed warmth to something more guarded, but he didn't move his hand from David's arm. If anything, he settled more comfortably in his chair, like a man preparing for a fight he'd been expecting. "Victoria," he said calmly as she reached their table, "I wondered if you'd be here tonight." She ignored him, her ice blue eyes locked on David. "What are you doing here?" David opened his mouth, but William spoke first. "He's here with me. David is my guest." "Your guest?" Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She turned to her father, her champagne glass shaking slightly in her hand. "Your guest? The same man I fired 3 weeks ago for gross insubordination?" "Fired for attending his daughter's school play, you mean?" William's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Let's be accurate about what actually happened." Victoria's face flushed. Around them, conversations continued, the glittering crowd oblivious to the drama unfolding at their table. But David could see a few heads turning, curiosity piqued by Victoria Sterling's raised voice. "He defied a direct order," Victoria said, lowering her voice, but not her intensity. "He was explicitly told his attendance was mandatory at a critical budget meeting, and he chose to skip it anyway. That's not about a school play. That's about basic professional responsibility. It's about a father keeping his promise to his 9-year-old daughter." William set his scotch down with a soft click. "Something you might understand if you'd ever had priorities beyond quarterly earnings." The words landed like a slap. Victoria's jaw tightened, and for a moment, David saw something flicker behind her eyes. Hurt, maybe. Or the memory of her own childhood, her own father too busy for school plays and dance recitals. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't make this about us." "It's always been about us, Victoria. You just refuse to see it." William gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit down. Let's talk like adults." "I'm not sitting down. I want to know what he's doing here with you." She turned back to David, and he forced himself to meet her gaze. "What is this? Some kind of revenge? Did you go crying to my father to get back at me?" David felt anger flare in his chest. For 9 years he'd kept his head down, stayed invisible, swallowed every indignity. But something had changed in him the day he chose Emma over Sterling Enterprises. He'd found his spine. "I didn't go to him," David said, his voice steady. "He came to me." "Oh, I'm sure he did." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Poor victimized employee, fired by the Ice Queen. Perfect sob story for my father's latest redemption project." "That's enough," William said sharply. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Victoria's composure was cracking now, her voice rising. "I know exactly what this is. It's the same thing you've been doing for years. Finding people to make me look bad. Employees I've let go, deals I've turned down. Anything you can use to remind me I'm not the leader you wanted me to be." "You're not the leader I wanted you to be," William said quietly. "But that's my fault, not yours. I taught you to be exactly what you are." The admission seemed to stun Victoria into silence. She stood there, her champagne glass forgotten, staring at her father with an expression David couldn't read. William turned to David. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I need to speak with my daughter privately." David started to stand, grateful for the escape. But Victoria held up her hand. No, he stays. This concerns him too. Victoria, he stays or I leave. Your choice. William sighed and gestured for David to sit back down. David did, feeling like a rabbit caught between two wolves, neither of whom cared much about his survival. Victoria pulled out a chair and sat, her posture rigid, her hands clasped on the table. Up close, David could see the strain in her face, the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when he first started at Sterling Enterprises. She looked tired, exhausted even. The weight of running a company with an iron fist was apparently heavier than it looked. "Explain this to me," she said, looking between them. "Explain how my father ends up dining with a man I fired for insubordination barely 3 weeks ago." William leaned back in his chair. "I offered David a job. He accepted. That's all you need to know." "That's not all I need to know. What kind of job?" "He's my senior advisor for the Sterling Legacy Fund. He's helping me restructure my charitable giving to focus on organizations that actually make a difference, instead of just looking good on tax forms." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You made a fired accountant your senior advisor?" "I made a man of integrity my senior advisor," William corrected. "There's a difference." "Integrity." Victoria turned to David, her gaze calculating. "You signed a non-compete agreement when you joined Sterling Enterprises. You're not allowed to work for any competing firm for 2 years after termination." David felt his stomach drop. He hadn't even thought about the non-compete. The Sterling Legacy Fund isn't the competing firm. It's a Sterling entity, which makes it subject to review. Victoria's smile was cold. "I could make this very complicated for you, Mr. Morrison." "You could," William said. "But you won't." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I own 51% of Sterling Enterprises, and if you push this, I'll remind the board of that fact." William's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the threat. "David's contract with me is legitimate, legal, and none of your business. Drop it." Victoria's face went pale. "You wouldn't." "Try me." The silence stretched between them, thick with years of unspoken conflict. David wanted to disappear, to be anywhere but sitting at this table, watching a father and daughter wage war over him. Finally, Victoria looked away. "Fine. He can work for your charity. I don't care." "Yes, you do," William said softly. "That's why you're so angry. Not because David defied you, but because he found something better. And it kills you that he did it by choosing his daughter over your company." "That's not—" Victoria stopped, her jaw working. "You don't understand what it's like to run Sterling Enterprises. The pressure, the constant demands, the expectation that I'll be perfect every single day. I can't afford to make exceptions. I can't afford to let people think they can put their personal lives ahead of their professional obligations." "Why not?" David surprised himself by speaking. Both Sterlings turned to look at him. "Why can't you afford that?" Victoria stared at him. "Excuse me?" "I'm genuinely asking. Why can't you afford to let a man with 9 years of perfect attendance take 1 day off to watch his daughter perform in a school play? What terrible thing would have happened if you'd said yes?" "The budget meeting was critical. I finished all the reports 3 days early. James Carter was fully briefed. Every number you needed was ready and waiting on your desk." David kept his voice level. "Nothing would have gone wrong if I'd been absent. You just needed to prove a point." "I needed to maintain standards," Victoria shot back. "If I make an exception for you, then everyone else starts asking for exceptions, and before you know it, the whole system falls apart." "Or maybe people would have worked harder because they felt valued instead of terrorized," William said. "Did that ever occur to you?" Victoria turned on her father. "You want to talk about terrorizing people? You invented that playbook. You taught me that employees are resources to be managed, not friends to be coddled. You're the one who said sentiment has no place in business. And I was wrong. William's voice cracked slightly. I was wrong, Victoria, about all of it. The admission hung in the air. Victoria's expression shifted, confusion mixing with her anger. You can't just say that. You can't just decide decades of your philosophy was wrong because it's convenient now. I'm not saying it's convenient. I'm saying I lost everything that mattered while I was building an empire. Your mother left because I couldn't see past the next deal. You grew up thinking love was weakness because I never showed you any. I have more money than God and nobody who gives a damn if I live or die. William's eyes were wet. So yes, I was wrong. And watching you make the same mistakes I made is the worst punishment I could imagine. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now. Victoria, wait, no! She grabbed her clutch purse from the table. I came here to network, not to be psychoanalyzed by my father and humiliated by a former employee. Enjoy your charity work, Mr. Morrison. I'm sure you'll find it very fulfilling. She turned to leave, but William called after her. He made $63,000 a year working for you. I'm paying him $80,000 with full benefits and flexible hours, so he can actually be a father to his daughter. You want to know why your turnover rate is 40%? That's why. Victoria froze, her back to them. For a long moment, she stood there, trembling slightly. Then she walked away without another word, disappearing into the glittering crowd. William watched her go, his face etched with sadness. I'm sorry you had to witness that. It's fine, David said, though his hands were shaking. I'm sorry I caused problems between you. You didn't cause anything. This has been brewing for 20 years. William drained his scotch. She's not a bad person, David, just a broken one. And I'm the one who broke her. They sat in silence for a while, the noise of the gala swirling around them. David thought about Victoria's face, the way she'd looked when William said he was wrong about everything. Like a foundation she'd built her entire life on had suddenly cracked. Do you think she'll be okay? David asked. Eventually, maybe, if she lets herself feel something besides ambition for 5 minutes. William signaled a waiter for another drink. The question is whether she'll learn from this, or just add it to the list of reasons to hate me. She doesn't hate you. Doesn't she? William smiled sadly. I missed her school plays, David. All of them. Every dance recital, every parent-teacher conference, every moment she needed me to show up. I was busy making money. And now she does the same thing to everyone in her life. And I have no right to criticize her for it, because I taught her how. David thought about Emma, safe at William's house, probably asleep on the couch by now, with popcorn kernels in her hair. He thought about the choice he'd made, the job he'd lost, the uncertainty that had terrified him. And he thought about Victoria Sterling, sitting alone somewhere in this glittering ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, and utterly isolated. It's not too late, David said, for either of you. You're a good man, David Morrison. Too good to waste your optimism on the Sterlings. William raised his fresh scotch, but I appreciate the sentiment. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. David met directors of homeless shelters, after-school programs, medical research foundations. He collected business cards, made mental notes, tried to focus on work instead of the confrontations still echoing in his head. But everywhere he looked, he half expected to see Victoria watching him, her ice-blue eyes full of accusations he couldn't answer. The ride back to Westchester was quiet. William stared out the window, lost in thoughts he didn't share. David checked his phone, saw a text from Sarah, saying Emma had fallen asleep around 9 and was tucked into the guest room. "You can stay the night if you'd like," William offered. "It's late and the spare rooms are ready." "I should get Emma home. School tomorrow." "Of course." William turned from the window. "David, about tonight, you don't need to apologize, sir." "I wasn't going to apologize. I was going to thank you," William smiled faintly, "for being brave enough to choose your daughter over a paycheck, for reminding me what that looks like, and for not running away when my family drama exploded all over your evening. I'm just glad I still have a job after all that. Your job is safe. I promise you that." William's expression grew serious. "But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you regret it? Standing up to Victoria, losing your position at Sterling Enterprises, all of it?" David thought about the question. 3 weeks ago, he'd been terrified, unemployed, uncertain, watching his savings dwindle. But he'd also sat in a school auditorium watching Emma shine, knowing he'd kept his promise. He'd found work that mattered with a man who valued him. And he slept better at night than he had in years. "No, sir," David said. "I don't regret it at all." William nodded, satisfied. "Good. Hold on to that. Because the hard part about making the right choice is living with the consequences, even when they're scary. You did that. Not many people can." They arrived at the house, and David gently woke Emma, who mumbled sleepily about the movie she'd watched and the cookies Sarah had made. He carried her to the car William had arranged to take them home, her head heavy on his shoulder. "See you Tuesday," William said, standing in his doorway. "And David, whatever happens with Victoria, don't let it shake you. You made the right call." The drive back to Queens took 40 minutes. Emma slept the whole way, and David watched the city lights blur past the window, thinking about Victoria's face, William's regrets, and the strange path his life had taken in 3 short weeks. When they finally got home, he tucked Emma into bed and sat in his kitchen with a cup of tea, too wired to sleep. His phone buzzed with an email notification. He almost ignored it, but something made him check. It was from Victoria Sterling, sent at 11:47 p.m. The subject line was empty. David's finger hovered over the delete button. He didn't need this. Didn't need whatever venom she'd decided to pour into an email after tonight's confrontation. But curiosity won. He opened it. The message was short, just 3 sentences. "You were right. The budget meeting went fine without you. I'm sorry." David read it 3 times, looking for the trap, the hidden barb, the twist that would make sense of Victoria Sterling apologizing. But there was nothing. Just those 3 sentences, sent in the middle of the night, by a woman who probably hadn't apologized to anyone in a decade. He didn't respond. Didn't know what to say. Instead, he saved the email, turned off his phone, and went to bed. Emma woke him at 6:30, bouncing on his bed. "Daddy, we have to practice my times tables before school." David groaned and pulled her into a hug. "Can we practice after breakfast?" "No, Miss Robertson is giving us a quiz today, and I need to know my 7s. So they sat at the kitchen table, eating cereal and reciting multiplication facts. And David thought about how strange it was that his life had fallen apart and come back together in the span of 3 weeks. Lost a job, gained a better one, made an enemy, maybe started to make peace. And through it all, Emma was still here, still needing him, still trusting that her daddy would show up when it mattered. That was enough. Everything else was just details. Tuesday morning, David took the train to Westchester, with Emma's math quiz still fresh in his mind. She'd gotten a 92, proudly showing him the paper with the gold star sticker before school. 7 times 8 had tripped her up, but she'd nailed everything else. Small victories, the kind that mattered more than quarterly earnings or budget projections. William was waiting in his study, surrounded by grant proposals and financial statements. "David, good. I need your eyes on something. The Children's Medical Research Foundation is asking for $2 million. Their numbers look solid, but something feels off about their overhead costs. They spent the morning dissecting spreadsheets, and David lost himself in the familiar rhythm of numbers. By lunch, he'd identified the problem. The foundation was paying its CEO $800,000 a year, while spending only 60 cents of every dollar on actual research. "They're out," Williams said, pushing the proposal aside. "I'm not funding executive salaries disguised as charity." Good catch. They ate sandwiches in the garden, and William asked about Emma's quiz. David found himself talking about her struggle with multiplication, her determination to get it right. The way her face lit up when she finally understood 7 times 8 equals 56.
"You're a good father," William said quietly. "Better than I ever was."
"You're trying now. That counts for something."
"Does it?"
William stared at his half-eaten sandwich.
"I haven't heard from Victoria since Saturday. She's not returning my calls."
David thought about the email, still sitting in his inbox. "She sent me a message, Saturday night, after the gala." William's head snapped up.
"What did it say?"
"That I was right, that the budget meeting went fine without me, and that she was sorry."
"Victoria apologized?"
William looked genuinely shocked.
"To you?"
3 sentences, that's all. But yeah. William sat back, processing this.
"Did you respond?"
"No. I didn't know what to say."
"Say thank you. Say you appreciate it. Say something, David. My daughter doesn't apologize. Ever. If she did it once, she's struggling with something bigger than her pride."
David pulled out his phone, staring at the email. William was right. This wasn't just an apology. It was Victoria Sterling admitting she'd been wrong. That was seismic. He typed slowly. "Miss Sterling, thank you for your email. I appreciate your honesty, and I hope you know I hold no ill will toward you. Sometimes the best lessons come from the hardest choices. I wish you well. David Morrison." He showed it to William before sending. The older man nodded. "Good. Not too familiar, not too cold. Professional, but kind." David hit send and put his phone away, trying not to think about whether Victoria would respond. She didn't. Not that day or the next. David fell into his routine, working from home, analyzing nonprofits, meeting with William twice a week. Emma's school held a parent-teacher conference, and for the first time in years, David didn't have to beg for time off or rearrange his schedule. He just went, sitting in the tiny classroom chair while Miss Robertson told him Emma was excelling in reading but needed to practice her handwriting. "She's a wonderful student, Mr. Morrison, and it's clear she has a supportive home life. That makes all the difference." David walked out of that classroom feeling 10 feet tall. A supportive home life. He'd done that. Despite everything, the long hours, the tight budget, the constant worry, he'd given Emma something that mattered more than money. 2 weeks passed. David stopped checking his email for messages from Victoria. She'd said her piece, he'd responded, and that was that. Life moved on. Then, on a Thursday afternoon while David was reviewing a proposal from a literacy program, his phone rang. Unknown number. "David Morrison?" "Mr. Morrison, this is Claire Westbrook from Sterling Enterprises." David's stomach tightened. "Claire, hi. Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure." She sounded nervous. "Miss Sterling asked me to call you. She'd like to meet with you. Tomorrow, if you're available." "Meet with me? Why?" "She didn't say. Just asked if you could come to her office at 2 p.m. Claire paused.
"Between you and me,
She's been different since the gala. Quieter. She actually said please when she asked me to call you. David rubbed his forehead. I don't know if that's a good idea. I understand, but I think it's important. To her, I mean. Claire lowered her voice. She's been in her office until midnight every night this week, just sitting there, staring at files. I think something's happening with her, Mr. Morrison. Something that started when she saw you with her father. David thought about William's words. If she apologized once, she's struggling with something bigger than her pride. All right. Tell her I'll be there. Thank you. And, Mr. Morrison, for what it's worth, I think you were right. About everything. The call ended, and David sat staring at his computer screen without seeing it. Victoria Sterling wanted to meet with him. The woman who'd fired him for choosing his daughter, who'd threatened to sue over a non-compete, who ran Sterling Enterprises like a military operation. What could she possibly want? He called William that evening, after Emma was asleep. Your daughter wants to meet with me tomorrow. I know. She called me this afternoon, asked if I'd mind. And? I told her it was your decision, not mine. But David, I think you should go. I think she's finally asking herself the right questions. What if she's not? What if this is just her way of asserting control, or proving some point? Then you walk out. You don't work for her anymore. You don't owe her anything. William paused. But if there's even a chance she's genuinely trying to change, don't you think that's worth an hour of your time? David knew he was right. He agreed to go, and spent the rest of the evening trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. Friday afternoon, David stood outside Sterling Tower for the first time in a month. The building looked the same, all glass and steel, cold and imposing. But he wasn't the same. He wasn't the invisible accountant anymore, afraid of being noticed, desperate to keep his head down. He was William Sterling's senior advisor, a man who'd chosen his daughter over his career and come out better for it. That confidence carried him through the lobby and into the elevator. 42nd floor, Victoria's domain. Claire was waiting when the doors opened. She looked relieved to see him. Thank you for coming. She's in her office. She walked him down the hallway, then stopped outside the familiar door. Good luck, Mr. Morrison. David knocked. Victoria's voice came through, softer than he remembered. Come in. She was standing at the window, her back to the door, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. She wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back in the same severe style he remembered. But something about her posture was different, less rigid, almost uncertain. Thank you for coming, she said without turning around. Claire said you wanted to see me. I did. I do. She finally turned to face him. Up close, David could see the changes the past month had written on her face. Dark circles under her eyes, new lines around her mouth. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with late nights at the office. Please, sit. David sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. Victoria didn't sit behind the desk like he expected. Instead, she took the chair next to him, a small gesture that felt significant. I've been thinking a lot since the gala, she began. About what you said. About what my father said. About a lot of things, really. David waited. He'd learned in his weeks with William that silence was often more powerful than words. Victoria folded her hands in her lap, a mirror of his own nervous gesture. I pulled your personnel file after I fired you. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for something to justify my decision. But I sat there reading 9 years of perfect performance reviews, and I realized something. I didn't know anything about you. I was just an accountant. You were a person, a father, a human being with a life outside these walls, and I treated you like a line item on a spreadsheet. She looked directly at him. I've done that to everyone, for years, maybe my whole career. Why are you telling me this? Because I called the school, PS 142. I told them I was considering a donation and wanted to know about their arts program. They sent me a program from your daughter's musical. Victoria pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket. The Enchanted Garden. Emma Morrison, playing Lily the Flower. David's throat tightened. You called Emma's school? I wanted to understand what I'd almost taken from you. From her. Victoria unfolded the program, and David saw Emma's name highlighted in yellow. And then I did something I've never done before. I looked at my calendar for the past 5 years and counted how many times I scheduled meetings during school hours, how many employees I forced to choose between their jobs and their children's events. Do you know what the number was? No. 63 times. 63 times I've made people miss their children's moments because I deemed company business more important. Her voice cracked slightly. I am my father, David. The version he's ashamed of being. The version that cost him his marriage and his relationship with me. David didn't know what to say. This vulnerability from Victoria Sterling was like watching ice crack in real time, and he wasn't sure if he should comfort her or give her space to break. After the gala, I went home and I looked at my apartment. Do you know what's in it? Furniture that a designer picked out. Art I bought because an appraiser said it would appreciate. A closet full of clothes I wear to maintain an image. But nothing personal. Nothing that matters. No photos, no memories. Nothing that would tell you who I am as a person. Because I honestly don't know anymore. Miss Sterling, Victoria, please. I think we're past formalities. She set the program on the small table between them. I want to show you something. She stood and walked to her desk, pulling out a thick folder. When she returned, she handed it to David. Inside were dozens of exit interviews from former Sterling Enterprises employees. David flipped through them, seeing the same themes repeated over and over. No work-life balance. Felt like a number, not a person. Constant pressure. No recognition. Fear-based management. I had HR compile these, Victoria said. Every employee who left in the past 2 years. I read all of them. 147 people, David, and every single one said basically the same thing. They didn't leave for better pay. They left because they felt dehumanized. David closed the folder. Why are you showing me this? Because I need your help. Victoria met his eyes. I need to change this company. Change how we treat people, how we value them, how we acknowledge that they have lives and families and obligations beyond these walls. But I don't know how. I've spent my entire career building walls, and now I need to tear them down. And I don't have the first clue where to start. So you're asking me? You stood up to me. You chose your daughter over your job even though it terrified you, even though you had every reason to cave and attend that meeting. You did the thing I've never been able to do. You put people before profit. I need someone who understands that, someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear. David leaned back in his chair, trying to process this. I don't work here anymore. I know, and I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking for your advice. Consulting, if you will. Victoria pulled out another paper. This one, a contract. I'm proposing a 6-month consulting agreement. You'd work with me to restructure our HR policies, our leave policies, our approach to work-life balance. 20 hours a month, your choice of schedule, at a rate of $200 an hour. That's $48,000 for 6 months of part-time work. David stared at the contract. You want to pay me $48,000 to tell you how to be a better boss? I want to pay you to help me build a better company. One where fathers can go to their daughters' school plays without fear. Where mothers can take their kids to doctor appointments. Where people are valued as humans, not just resources. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly. I know I can't undo the damage I've done. But maybe I can stop doing more.
Why me? Why not a professional consultant, someone with experience in organizational change? Because consultants will give me theories and frameworks. You'll give me truth. You'll tell me when I'm being unreasonable because you've lived it. You've been the person I've crushed under my policies. She paused. And because my father trusts you. If he can see something in you worth investing in, maybe I can learn to see it too. David picked up the contract, reading through it carefully. The terms were fair, the compensation generous. But more than that, there was a clause that made him pause. All recommendations subject to Mr. Morrison's discretion, with no retaliation for suggestions that conflict with current management practices. I had the lawyers add that, Victoria said. I need you to be honest with me, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. David thought about Emma, about the promise he'd made to always put her first. This contract wouldn't interfere with that. 20 hours a month, on his schedule, while still working for William. It was doable. But more than that, it was a chance to help create the kind of workplace he'd wished for all those years. A place where the next single father wouldn't have to choose between his job and his daughter's school play. I need to run this by William Sterling first. Make sure it doesn't conflict with my work for him. I already called him. He approved it. Said if you agreed, he'd be proud of you. David smiled despite himself. Of course William had known about this. The man was always 3 steps ahead. All right, I'll do it. But I have conditions. Name them. First, this has to be real. Not PR, not lip service. If we're going to change policies, they have to actually be implemented and enforced. Agreed. Second, if you slide back into old patterns, I reserve the right to walk away. No hard feelings. But I won't be part of pretending to change while nothing actually changes. Fair. Third, Emma comes first. Always. If she has a school event, a doctor's appointment, anything that requires me to be there, I'm there. This consulting work happens around my life as a father, not the other way around. Victoria smiled, a real smile that softened her entire face. That's the whole point, David. That's exactly the point. They shook hands, and David felt the strange sensation of the world tilting on its axis. A month ago, this woman had fired him. Now she was asking him to help her become the kind of leader he'd wished she'd been all along. When do we start? Victoria asked. Next week. I'll need to review all current HR policies, interview some employees, get a sense of the real culture beyond what the exit interviews say. Done. I'll have Claire set up whatever you need. Victoria stood, extending her hand again. Thank you, David, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. Everyone deserves a chance to do better, David said. Even you. He left Sterling Tower feeling lighter than he had in years. On the train ride home, he called William. I heard you met with Victoria, William said by way of greeting. You could have warned me what she wanted. Would you have gone if I had? David laughed. Probably not. She's trying, David. Really trying. I haven't seen her like this since she was young. Before I broke her. William's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for believing she could change. I'm not sure I do yet, but I'm willing to find out. That's all any of us can ask for. The next 6 months were unlike anything David had experienced. He interviewed Sterling Enterprises employees, dozens of them, listening to their stories of missed birthdays
and skipped anniversaries, of children who didn't recognize them because they were always at the office, of marriages strained to breaking by the relentless demands of work. He compiled the data into a report that made Victoria cry. Actually cry. Tears streaming down her face as she read story after story of the human cost of her management style. "I did this," she whispered. "I destroyed all these lives in the name of efficiency." "No," David said gently. "You created an environment that prioritized the wrong things. But you can create a new environment. That's why we're doing this." Together, they restructured the leave policy. Mandatory paid parental leave, 12 weeks. Flexible scheduling for parents with school-aged children. No meetings scheduled before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. unless absolutely critical. A clear definition of what constituted a true emergency versus what could wait until normal business hours. "The board is going to hate this," Victoria said, reviewing the proposals. "The board wants retention and productivity. Show them the numbers. Companies with better work-life balance have 30% higher retention and 20% higher productivity. This isn't charity, it's smart business." They presented the changes to the board in March. Victoria stood at the front of the room, her father sitting in the back row, and laid out the case for transformation. "For years, I've run this company on the principle that work comes first, always. That employees should be grateful for their jobs and willing to sacrifice everything for the company. And you know what we got? A 40% turnover rate. A reputation as one of the worst places to work in New York. Lost productivity from burned-out employees. And a culture where people were afraid to be human." She clicked to the next slide, showing the proposed policies. "I'm asking you to approve a complete restructuring of how we treat our employees. Not because it's nice, but because it's necessary. We're losing talent to competitors who offer flexibility. We're paying millions in recruiting and training costs to replace people who leave. And we're leaving money on the table because our employees are too exhausted to innovate." One board member raised his hand. "This will cost us millions in the short term." "It will save us tens of millions in the long term," David interjected from his seat. Victoria had insisted he be there. "I've run the numbers. The ROI on these policies is clear within 18 months. Another board member spoke up. "What proof do we have this will work?" William Sterling stood. Every eye in the room turned to him. He rarely spoke at board meetings anymore, preferring to let Victoria run the show. But today, he had something to say. "Proof? Look at me. I built this company on the same principles Victoria's been using. Work above all else. Sacrifice everything for success. And you know what I have to show for it? Money I can't spend before I die. A daughter who didn't speak to me for 10 years. And grandchildren I barely know. You want proof these policies don't work? I'm standing here as living evidence." He looked at Victoria with something like pride. "My daughter is trying to build something better than what I built. If this board can't see the value in that, then I'll use my majority share to force the issue. Your choice." The room fell silent. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "All in favor of the proposed policy changes?" Every hand went up. The implementation took months. There were stumbles, resistance from middle management, moments when Victoria wanted to revert to old patterns. But David was there, steadying her, reminding her why this mattered. "It's not about being soft," he told her after she'd struggled with approving leave for an employee whose father was dying. "It's about being human. That employee will come back more loyal, more committed, because you showed him his life matters more than his work." Emma's 10th birthday fell in May. David took the whole day off, no guilt, no second guessing. He and Emma went to the zoo, got ice cream, saw a movie. When they got home, there was a package on their doorstep. Inside was a gift wrapped in silver paper with a card. Dear Emma, I heard it was your birthday. Your father talks about you all the time, and I wanted to send something special. I hope you enjoy the books. Best wishes, Victoria Sterling. Inside were 5 hardcover books, a complete fantasy series Emma had been dying to read. David felt his throat tighten. "Who's Victoria?" Emma asked, already tearing into the first book. "Someone who's learning what's important," David said. In June, Sterling Enterprises made the news, not for profits or acquisitions, but for winning an award as one of the most improved workplaces in America. The article quoted Victoria extensively. "I learned from the best employee I ever fired that people aren't resources to be managed. They're humans to be valued. And when you value people, they give you their best work, not because they're afraid, but because they want to. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." The article included a photo of Victoria in her office, but instead of her usual severe expression, she was smiling. A real smile that reached her eyes. William called David that evening. "Have you seen it?" "Just read it. She did good." "She did better than good. She did what I could never do. She admitted she was wrong and did something about it." William paused. "I'm proud of her, and I'm grateful to you for helping her get there." "She did the work, sir. I just pointed her in the right direction." "Don't sell yourself short. You changed 2 lives when you chose to go to that school play. Mine and hers." In August, David's consulting contract ended. Victoria offered to extend it, but he declined. "You don't need me anymore," he told her over coffee in her office. "You've got this." "I'm terrified I'll backslide without you keeping me honest." "Then hire someone to keep you honest. Make it an official position. Chief People Officer or something. Someone whose whole job is making sure you remember employees are humans." "Would you take that job?" "No. I'm happy where I am. But you'll find the right person." Victoria stood and extended her hand. "Thank you, David, for everything." "Thank you for being willing to change. That took more courage than I think you realize." They shook hands, and David left Sterling Tower for the last time, knowing he'd helped build something that would outlast his involvement. Emma started 5th grade in September. She joined the drama club, already planning for next year's musical. David attended every rehearsal he could, sitting in the back of the auditorium, watching her confidence grow. One Saturday in October, William invited them both to his house for lunch. They ate on the garden terrace, Emma chattering about her latest role, William asking questions like a real grandfather instead of a distant billionaire. "I have something to tell you," William said after dessert. Emma had run off to play with William's golden retriever. "Victoria called me last week. We had dinner. Talked for 4 hours. First real conversation we've had in a decade." "That's wonderful, sir." "She told me about a man she's dating. A teacher, apparently. Someone who doesn't care about her money or her company. Just cares about her." William smiled. "She sounded happy, David. Actually happy. I didn't know she knew how to be happy." "Everyone can learn," David said, "if they're willing." "I'm thinking about stepping down from the foundation board, leaving it in your hands. You've proven you know what to do with money better than I ever did." David nearly choked on his coffee. "Sir, I'm not qualified to run a foundation." "Neither was I. But you care about the right things. You'll figure out the rest." William looked at Emma playing in the grass. "Besides, I want to spend what time I have left being a better grandfather. Maybe take my granddaughter to the zoo once in a while, like you do with Emma." "I think Victoria would like that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma play, and David thought about the path that had led him here. 9 years of invisibility. One choice to put his daughter first. And a complete transformation of his life and the lives of people he'd never expected to impact. The following spring, David attended the Sterling Enterprises annual gala, not as an employee, but as William's guest, wearing a tuxedo that actually belonged to him now. Victoria was there, standing at a podium, accepting an industry award for workplace innovation. "A year ago, I would have told you that success meant sacrifice," she said in her speech. "That you couldn't build something great without leaving casualties behind. But I was wrong. You can be successful and human. You can drive profit and value people. You can build an empire and still make it to your daughter's school play." She looked directly at David, standing with William in the crowd. "Someone taught me that. Someone who had the courage to choose his daughter over his job, knowing it might cost him everything. And in doing so, he showed me that the only things worth building are the things that make us more human, not less." The crowd applauded, but David barely heard it. He was thinking about Emma, safe at home with Mrs. Chen, probably already asleep. Thinking about the choice he'd made that seemed so terrifying at the time and so obvious in hindsight. After the gala, Victoria found him outside, where he was waiting for his car. "That was quite a speech," David said. "I meant every word." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "I wanted to give you this personally." Inside was a check for $50,000. David stared at it. "What is this?" "Your share of the productivity bonuses. Since implementing the new policies, Sterling Enterprises has seen a 23% increase in productivity and a 62% drop in turnover. The board approved bonuses for everyone who contributed to that change. You contributed more than anyone." "Victoria, I can't." "You can and you will. Put it toward Emma's college fund, or take a vacation, or just know that you changed an entire company culture and got paid for it." She smiled. "Thank you, David, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to." David took the check, still stunned. "You did the changing. I just held up a mirror." "Sometimes that's all someone needs." She walked back inside, and David stood there in the cool spring air, holding a check that represented more than money. It represented the proof that doing the right thing, even when it was terrifying, could lead to something better than he'd ever imagined. The car arrived, and David headed home to Queens, to the small apartment where Emma was sleeping, to the life he'd almost lost by keeping it. He paid Mrs. Chen, checked on Emma, kissed her forehead, and sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea. His phone buzzed with a text from William. "Proud of you. Get some sleep." Another from Victoria. "Thank you for everything. You changed my life." David smiled and set his phone down. He'd changed their lives, maybe, but they'd changed his too. Shown him that taking a stand mattered, that choosing family over fear could open doors he'd never known existed, that the scariest choices were often the ones worth making. He finished his tea and went to bed, knowing that when Emma woke up in the morning asking about her social studies project, he'd be there to help. And the day after that, and the day after that, because that's what mattered. Not the job title or the bank account, but showing up for the people who counted on you. 9 years of invisibility had taught him how to survive. One day of courage had taught him how to live. And that made all the difference.